Welcome to my channel where I'll be exploring the aviation museums of the world. And for my first video here, I'm starting local at the City of Norwich Aviation Museum. Although it's a relatively small and privately run museum, that doesn't stop it from having some large and impressive exhibits, including the Avro Vulcan and the British Aerospace Nimrod. Today I am here at the City of Norwich Aviation Museum, located just over the main road from the international airport. This former RAF airbase used to be home to squadrons between 1939 and 1963, before being transformed into the current civilian airport. In 2022, the museum acquired the collections of the Fenlands and West Norfolk Aviation Museum after it closed down, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail later on in the video, but first let's see what aircraft are on show. The first exhibit is one of the most iconic RAF jet interceptors of the Cold War, the English Electric Lightning. These flew from nearby RAF Coltishall, with the museum's example being painted in RAF 74 squadron markings on one side and the Saudi Air Force on the other. Next along is the Gloucester Meteor F8 in colourful 245 squadron markings, the unit operating with Meteors at Horsham St Faith from 1946 to 1955. Continuing on with the British theme first, the museum has two Hawker Hunters. This one, which is actually an ex-Danish Mark 51 Hunter, but was until recently painted in RAF 74 squadron colours. And another Hunter that sits on the opposite side of the museum, this one being an RAF F6 version in 79 squadron colours. The last complete RAF fast jet at the museum is the Seppicat Jaguar, an Anglo-French ground attack aircraft in 54 squadron markings. One of the aircraft at this museum that has the closest links to the area is this Seppicat Jaguar, which was based at RAF Coltishall that's just down the road from here. You can find one of these complete airframes at this museum, and if you go to the Norwich County Council building, there's another on a plinth. There is also this British Aerospace Harrier T4 trainer on show, the tail being camouflaged like an RAF Harrier, whereas the rest of the airframe is in Fleet Air Arm colours. Overshadowing this are two of the largest aircraft here at the museum. First up is the Avro Vulcan B-2 bomber that arrived at the museum in 1983. And the other is the largest aircraft here at the museum, the British Aerospace Nimrod MRA-2. These last three aircraft don't have anything specific to do with the aviation history of the area, unlike the other RAF jets that once served at either Horsham St Faith or Coltishall. But in the case of the Nimrod, it was given away when this type was retired from RAF service, so the museum decided to adopt it. A brightly painted Westland Whirlwind in the RAF's Yellow Air Sea Rescue Scheme is also on show, minus its main rotor blades, these helicopters having been based at RAF Coltishall. There are two other complete military jet aircraft held outside which are not ex-RAF aircraft, these being the French-built Dassault Mystère 4 and the American Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star. The Mystère is one of several examples of this aircraft you can find in British air museums, though for as long as I remember, it's always been still awaiting markings. The Lockheed T-33 is also a relatively common sight in the aviation museums here, though this one has been painted in bright US Air Force markings. The far side of the museum grounds are occupied by civilian aircraft, the first two of these having served Norwich Airport in freight and passenger roles. A regular sight at Norwich Airport back in the day before jet airliners overtook most of the commercial activities at Norwich Airport would have been this Handley Page Herald, and further on over here, the Fokker F-27 Friendship. There's actually 1.5 of these aircraft at the museum, the complete one you can see behind me, and a fuselage by the door. The Herald, which served in civilian roles from 1959 to the mid-1980s, occasionally visited Norwich Airport with the Air UK airline. The Fokker F-27 was the Dutch equivalent of the Herald and a much more successful aircraft, though the museum's two exhibits were both employed with the same airline as the Herald. The last large-sized aircraft at the museum is the Avro RJ-85, this one having joined the collection in 2020. One of the most recent additions to this museum is the Avro RJ-85. Now, aircraft can be a bit difficult to move because of their size and weight, but this one had a bit of an unusual way of getting to this museum. It was literally hoisted up on a crane and dropped into place in its new home. Last but not least are a collection of light aircraft in various states of repair, these being a Cessna 401, a Piper PA-30 and a Sakata MS-880. In one corner of the Aviation Museum are a number of single and twin-engined small civilian aircraft. Now, if this was Mexico or America, I'd probably say these were aircraft that had been impounded by the local airport for drug smuggling charges. This is Norwich though, it's probably not going to be that reason. The museum also holds considerable collections of aircraft parts and cockpit sections, with the majority of the cockpit sections held under a canvas hangar. These include the forward sections of two RAF Seppercat Jaguars and a McDonnell Douglas Phantom, along with an early model Buccaneer and a BAC Canberra. Inside the main hangar buildings are the cockpit sections of a Hawker Hunter in 74 squadron markings, along with a new edition of the Hunting Percival Jet Provost T3. This is one of the exhibits brought over from the Fenlands and West Norfolk Aviation Museum. A newly built extension houses a collection that comprises of World War II era engines and hundreds of artifacts and recovered parts from crashed aircraft that have been salvaged. Connecting onto the new part of the museum, the displays have been rearranged, with one hall being dedicated to civilian aviation in the area, including a very yellow dedication to the local airline of Air Anglia. A separate hall is dedicated to the history of RAF Cultureshall, proudly recognised as home of the Jaguar. More models are on show here that depict what aircraft types flew from the airbase. Returning back to the hall by the visitors' entrance, the displays here are mostly to do with the American presence in East Anglia both during and after World War II, with scale models and relics of recovered aircraft, along with this impressive display of the US Air Force aircraft based at RAF Sculthorpe. If you have enjoyed this video on the Norwich Aviation Museum, why not leave a like and follow my channel for more, and I'll bring you many more aviation museums from the rest of the world. However, until next time, see you around.